Hello everyone and welcome back to the last module in Kickstart Your Cybersecurity Career. So in this module, it's a small module, and in this module we will be looking at some of the advanced techniques that used by malware, used by attackers in general. We'll be looking at the Fileless attacks, we'll look at the targeted ransomware attacks, and much more. First, we will start by the maintaining persistence. We talked in the previous module about different types of malware and how the analysis process happens. And we talked about a little bit in the malware functionality. The thing that we didn't talk about, and it's really, really important in your incident response process or malware analysis process, is understanding the way that a malware can maintain persistence. And maintaining persistence means that if the system is rebooted, if the guy has logged out and logged in again, the malware can keep running and restart it over and over. So if you have a malware that you run it once, and then once you restart the computer, it doesn't run again, then the attacker will lose control every few days, maybe every day, if you turn off your PC every day. So for the attacker to keep maintaining his access on the infected machines, you need to have a way to make his virus run or make his malware run every time the system reboots. There are so many different ways the attacker can make his malware runs every single time, and we'll explore some of them. The most known and the most common one is adding a registry value inside this key. Each key current user, software, Microsoft, Windows, current version run, or run once, but run is the most common. This one you will see it in so many different malware. Until today is the most widely used one by malware to maintain persistence. In this registry key, they add a value with the virus name or whatever the name they want to use, and then the file path of the malware. And if you go to this registry key right now, you will see that on your machine you already have some values are written there with some applications that runs every single time you reboot your system, and the malware will just add itself to this path. For malware that are DLLs, they also use another path, which is the HKey local machine, software, Microsoft, Windows, current version, Windows NT, current version, Windows, and then application init or ABP init _ DLLs. This path, all the libraries that are written in this value, specifically the ABP init _ DLLs, are all these libraries load in every single process on the user and the user login, or the users in general. Most of the apps, I wouldn't talk about the system apps, but most of the normal apps will have these libraries loaded in the real. So for the malware, he can choose between so many different processes to load. If he's being saved here, he can choose to run in Chrome, he can choose to run in Internet Explorer, he can choose to run in some chatting apps, he can choose the app to run inside. One thing here, HKey local machine is basically a place in registry where any changes that happens affects all users in the system. To be able as a user to make changes to this HKey local machine, you need to have an admin privilege. So for the attacker, he need to bypass the user access control, the UEC, sorry, it's here V. He need to bypass the user access control, or if you are a restricted account, he might need to escalate privilege. So this is very hard for the malware to set it up. Of course, he can still run DLLs through this path, through the first path, the HKey current user, the current version run, by using some other tools to load the malware, by using some apps that loads some DLLs. He can actually load his DLL in using a command line inside this current version run. There are other ways. He can, if his malware is a as an exe file or a DLL or even a driver, he can still he can create a service with the name of this malware and let the service runs every single time the system gets rebooted. And this is also another way to go away completely from that user and become a system library. Of course, as you can imagine, creating a service requires as well to bypass the user access control. Another way is by scheduling tasks and write on the a task file into operating system. And scheduling tasks is really one of the very common ways for the malware to run every single time, and he can also create or can schedule tasks on other systems inside the company. He can use the domain account to schedule tasks in other machines in by using this domain account. So it can be used as a lateral movement as well as maintaining persistence. One thing else as well is image file execution options. This is, as you can imagine, also requires the admin privilege, and this one. So every app is being executed can have a path here inside the file image file execution options, and can allow to have a debugger always run every single time this app runs. So if you have, let's say, notepad.exe, you can associate a program to run every time you run notepad.exe, and this program should be running as a debugger for this notepad, but you can associate any app. So let's say this is one of the malware announced tools called Process Explorer, and it has the ability to replace Task Manager. So when you click on Replace Task Manager, what it does is that it goes to that exact path, the image file execution option. It goes to the Task Manager.exe inside of it, and then it associates itself to the Task Manager as a debugger. What happens is that both of them get executed at the same time. The Process Explorer closes the Task Manager and it takes over. So this is basically one of the ways that the malware can associate themselves with any other app and always run every time this app runs on the system. That could be a browser, so it doesn't run every time the system reboots, but every time the victim is using his browser, which means that he was able to connect through the internet. Or it can be with an app that restarts every single time the system boots, and he can run every time the system reboots with him. So this is one of the ways. And there is a tool, I think we talked about it for quite a while now. It's called autoruns.exe, and basically show you all the different paths you might use for a malware that might use to maintain persistence. And it shows you all the different apps that's actually loaded or actually saved in each one of these techniques for maintaining persistence. You can explore all of them in any system and see if there's any one of them or any one of the files that looks malicious or the path look suspicious, and you need to investigate further. So this is some of the most common ways for malware to maintain persistence. I just wanted to get this to just speak about this fast before we go into the main topic of today, which is the Fileless attacks and as well the ransomware attacks. So let's get started with the Fileless attack. Fileless attacks are type of attacks that run most of their time in memory. They don't have files on the system, or mostly they don't have files on the system, which allows them to avoid any detection or any signatures that only scan files. Most of the antiviruses, they focus on files. So Fileless attacks say, okay, I will not have any file on the system. I will not allow the antivirus to detect me through scanning different files. I will only run in the system. And because of that as well, they leave very little trace to forensics. If you are doing digital forensics on the desk after the system has been rebooted or after the system has been terminated, there's very little artifacts on the system you can see to actually detect the presence of this attack. Most of the traces, most of the evidences of this attack are in the memory. They also use legitimate tools which allow them to run even if there's whitelisting, even if the very limited amount of applications that are allowed to run in that system. They can use some of these limited amount of applications and run using them, and with this way they can still run with very restricted type of security. They are also using legitimate tools, which makes it very hard for the blue team or for the SOC team to find them and monitor their activities through all of the logs that they see. If you are using PowerShell, PowerShell is being used by IT administrators as well as malware authors or cybersecurity criminals. So it's very hard to say that this PowerShell, or if I see PowerShell, that means something suspicious or something malicious. The same with many other apps. They are also easier to conduct and somehow, and you will see why is that. So some of the common misconceptions about Fileless attack or misunderstandings about Fileless attacks, some people think that they are very new. It's something new that's happening recently. But the truth is not. It has appeared from long time, from 2001 with Code Red and after. And Fileless attacks are just trending right now. Fileless attacks are also not exclusively fileless. They might have some files, but delete themselves very fast. They might be a malicious document at the beginning, but this malicious document replaces itself with a legitimate document and then execute the whole malware on the memory. So it still has some little traces with forensics, but they are very, very little. And through the time, they can even be hidden. But most of the time, they are fileless. Most of the stage of the attack is going from one fileless stage to another, to a third, to a fourth. So it's very hard to trace them through the time. There are also, some people think they are rare because they are new. But the truth is, they are neither new nor rare. 1/3 of the attacks are fileless, and that number increases over the time. And some people think that they can be stopped by traditional antivirus techniques, but the truth is not. The antiviruses are focusing on files, on hashes, on IOCs. All of this stuff cannot detect Fileless attacks. There are some antivirus applications that can detect in-memory attacks, but there's vast majority that can detect this type of attacks and cannot even communicate about it correctly, because Fileless attacks rely mainly on scripts, and scripts are harder to deobfuscate and harder to scan. They are not really easy to detect with IOCs and threat intelligence when people exchange all of these different hashes, because these files does not have a hash. They are not files. They are Fileless attacks. So it gets really harder to be detected and prevented. The Fileless attacks looks like this: either a malicious document or a spear phishing with a malicious document, and this malicious document, still a file, executes a Visual Basic script, then a PowerShell script or more of Visual Basic script, then goes into running some malicious code in memory and continue like that, and then it maintains resistance using the script. So it includes these scripts in different registry keys and schedule tasks on whatever, and keep them every time getting executed every time you reboot the system. So we will get about that later, but you can see a schedule task that run PowerShell with a command that includes with a script, and this script actually downloads the malware again and keeps and then restart the Fileless attack. As well as we see another path, which is the maybe an exploit, remote code execution. This remote code execution executes some code. This code gets injected into other processes and keeps running inside inside the realm of any process in the system, maybe the browser, maybe an office application, and keeps running inside and keeps and then find a way to maintain persistence using some scripts. As you can see that fileless attacks rely heavily on scripts, also on memory injection or code injection in different processes in memory, and mostly you will see these two techniques being used over and over for the fileless attacks to keep running. They use PowerShell, Visual Basic Script, JavaScript, and different scripts like that. So they run under known processes like PowerShell.exe, Microsoft HTML application.exe, registry serves 32.exe, and others. They maintain resistance, as we said, by executing these scripts through command line into these apps. So basically, they still are not a file. They are just in the registry or in the scheduled task as one command. They are easy to obfuscate. And antiviruses, they have really a problem deobfuscating and actually detecting scripts. Scripts are very hard to create signatures for, are very hard to deobfuscate and understand their behavior, or kind of having a signature or behavioral signature for them. So they can easily bypass most of traditional antivirus techniques and keep their existence inside the systems and remain silent. And as we said, they can bypass most of the defenses and very hard to detect. One example is JavaScript Baumet. That's the name that's given from 10 Micro. And this attack was like this. There's a JavaScript that arrives to the user system via start registry key. Like they didn't see how it started, but from Trend Micro perspective, they only saw the auto run from current version 1, and it executes a PowerShell command. This PowerShell downloads and executes every single time another code that basically does an injection. This code downloads a binary file. It's being said as it's an icon, but it's a binary file that gets injected, decrypted, and then it gets injected inside other process as an assembly code running in the memory, or what call it a shell code. And this shell code is the backdoor that actually executes most of the functionality of the malware. So you see here the registry key, which is in Microsoft Windows current version 1 that most of the malwares are using, and basically it's called COM+, and it's registry serves 32, and then /n, which means silent, /s, so it means silent, /n means don't use the register server, /u means unregister the serves, /i, which used mostly to bypass additional parameters. In here, he puts the malware link, the malware URL, like HTTP // then malware the true, then / then the name of the malware, and this parameter is being sent to SCR object.dll, and this is the Microsoft script component runtime, and this basically it's mainly used to load a component, an only component, and what it does is that it downloads follows that link, this malicious link, download the file. Mostly this file ends with .sct, and it is an XML file that describes that object that is being loaded by this Microsoft script component runtime. It describes this component, and this XML file can include some JavaScript or some Visual script embedded inside this XML file. So what happens here is that this rich server 32, this is the legitimate application that everything will run under his realm. So that will be maybe the whitelisted app, or the app that the malware is using. and you will see that as just a legitimate app. And this app, what it does, it loads this library, the Microsoft Script Component Runtime library. And this library takes a URL as an additional parameter here. It takes that URL, takes it as an XML file. It downloads that XML file. It goes into basically loading that component, thinks it's a component to load or an OLE component, and inside this XML file, there's some JavaScript code or Visual Basic Script code that this DLL executes to make sure that the object is loaded correctly. And what happens is just executes the malware code. The malware was able to be downloaded every single time, being executed in the memory by this library, because this doesn't save the file to the disk. It just downloads it and executes it in memory. So the malware runs in the memory and makes sure that it maintains like that. And the malware loads under the realm of rich svr32.exe. So basically, it's able to run completely fileless and completely outside of being detected under a legitimate application. Malware as well can inject code into another process. It can load basically with some Visual Basic Script or JavaScript. It can load a complete DLL file and then take that file and inject it inside another application. So let's say there's Chrome.exe is running, and Word.exe, which has the malware, the Visual Basic Script is running as a macro inside the document, inside Word.exe. This Visual Basic code or Visual Basic Script code can basically take some binary data, which is the malware library, the malware DLL, and take that and inject all of that inside Chrome.exe. It can do this by basically, sorry, I'm going very fast, by locating a memory inside the Chrome.exe, book a place inside Chrome.exe, a place in memory, let's say from the address 1000 to the address 5000, and then it takes the malware code. Mostly it's just some small code or a complete library, like a complete file. Of course, it's loaded inside memory. It's not saved to a file, but it's a complete malware file .dll, and inject all of that inside Chrome.exe, inside this allocated memory. And then it uses an API called create remote thread, a Windows function, and create thread or remote thread or thread itself is basically an execution path. So the same application can have multiple execution paths at the same time. They call them multi-threaded applications, which can execute multiple things at the same time. And what the malware does is that it adds one of the things that are being executed, one of the paths that's being executed at the same time inside one application is the malware code. So Chrome can be fully functional, running its own code, plus it's also executing the malware code in the background. It happens like this. The malware library is here. He basically allocate a place inside, or like book a place inside the target process, a free memory. Then he takes the malware DLL, put it in that free memory, and then execute it by creating a thread. In the code, it looks like this. Virtual lock EX, which basically can allocate memory inside different other processes, outside of the main malware process. Then it writes the malicious code using write process memory, which is another function that writes inside other process memory. So he writes the malware code there inside the other process memory, and then it uses create remote thread API or Windows function to execute that malware inside that process realm. So the application is still running normally, and also the malware is running beside it in the background. That's basically the code injection. Code injection is a very, very, very common technique. You will see it across so many different malware. I have seen so many malware using this technique. I rarely see a malware now that doesn't use code injection at some point. For fileless attacks, as we said, for them to maintain persistence, they still maybe use the same register entries we know, or scheduled tasks, or even services. But inside the file path, they don't use a file path, but they use one of the legitimate applications and give it a command or a command line with some code that downloads the malware again and executes it automatically in the memory. For a code like this, PowerShell.exe, and give it a command to execute. IEX means execute, and then download a file, which is this link. Let's say malware.com/myscript.bs1. It downloads that one and then executed with IEX inside the memory. And what will be downloaded is basically additional PowerShell script that runs automatically inside the memory, and this more PowerShell code can do more stuff, and it can execute more malware, can download even more, and maybe inject some code inside another process. PowerShell.exe, PowerShell or Visual Basic Script or JavaScript has the ability to inject code inside other processes as well. So they can do the code injection and load some real DLL or real assembly code inside other processes. And this command can be executed from anywhere. It can be executed from a service. Can be the service path is this file or this command, or a scheduled task or a register entry. So it keeps the malware running all the time in the memory and never been on the disk. Fileless attacks can still be detected with endpoint detection response. These tools help to detect these attacks. Some of the techniques, for example, to detect something like this is to search for inside an EDR, maybe let's say carbon black, for example, as an example. You can search for a process name SVR32 and a module loaded inside called SCR object.dll. So you find a process name like that has a library loaded inside of it with that name, and that could and not must represent a malware that's being running using this technique. Other things that finding PowerShell.exe is being loaded from a different process, like Word.exe is executing PowerShell.exe, or Excel.exe is executing PowerShell.exe. These connections that doesn't make sense should be itself something suspicious to flag and to detect that there's something malicious is behind that. And this is just some of the techniques to detect fileless attacks using endpoint detection response. Also, you need a well-trained incident response team to detect this type of attacks. You need to have more threat intelligence to understand what are the attacks that's being used over and over and used by the attackers that might target my system, and what is their techniques, how they execute their malware, what exactly should I block, what exactly should I target or set an alert for, and how I should detect them. So if they are using mostly spear phishing document with a Microsoft HTML application, so I can detect the connection between, let's say, Word.exe and msHTE.exe, or Excel.exe and msHTE.exe, which is one of the apps that's used to execute JavaScript and Visual Basic Script code. So I can use threat intelligence to understand what's the common techniques that might be used against my organization. Last but not least, when you see something suspicious in the system, you will need to perform memory forensics. You will not need to reboot the system, then to take the disk and then scan the disk, because mostly the malware will not be in the disk, to be mostly executed in memory. So you will need to learn memory forensics and actually use memory forensics to to perform a deep investigation on what's happening in the memory, detect these scripts from inside memory, and actually see the code injection and detect the Fileless attack. If you are building your career in cybersecurity, I'd recommend you to understand malware analysis more in depth, especially Fileless attacks, because that will add a lot to your resume. If you want to target blue team in general, from incident response, digital forensics, memory forensics, threat hunting, digital investigator in general, you will need to understand malware analysis and Fileless attacks, because they are more and more common, and they are something that so many companies are scared from. If you are with me until now, I recommend you that you write the name of this module that you have studied in Kickstart Your Cybersecurity Career. You add the training to your resume, and you add the name of that module as topics you have covered, that has been covered in that training. That will add a lot to your resume. So that's for Fileless attacks. That's one example about using memory forensics. Sorry, I forgot the slide. So this is an example of using a volatility, which is a very known tool for memory forensics. And here I have run a command called, well, this I think is not my own machine, but I analyze the same memory dump. I use the tool, well, it's maybe my machine. Anyway, I use the tool called malfind, which basically finds some injected memory inside different processes. And you can see here in reader_sl, which is I think a PDF reader, we find some files being loaded, some exe file, MZ file, being loaded inside the system. Now you know that MZ is the beginning of any malicious document. We found some of them are being loaded inside this process, not as a normal DLL, but it's being allocated as read write execute, and it's being a private memory being injected inside reader_sl. We saw the same thing inside exploded.exe as well. So with this, we found that there's an evidence of memory injection or DLL injection inside this process. We investigated further, and we were able to find the malware Crydex. So that's just one example of Fileless attacks. That's it for that section, and now we'll go to the ransomware. What is ransomware? Ransomware is basically a malware that is designed to extort money from users by disabling a functionality of an important computer system, or by encrypting files on the system, as well as the shared network drives. Ransom itself is mostly used before as a word for criminals that force people to pay money to stay protected, or getting the services they used to get, that they originally get without these criminals anyway. So some variations of ransomware, some of the ransomware encrypt the master boot record and ask for money to pay if you want your system to get back, or delete some files. They will delete some ransomware. They will say they will delete some files if the victim took too long to pay the ransom. Maybe restrict access to some files or data, but not encrypting them. And I saw this type of ransomware before, where they put a screen on the laptop, and they force you to either pay the ransom or your computer will be locked, but there is no encryption is happening. Some basically, they don't really as well encrypt files. They still have access to the files, but what they tell you is that if you don't pay, they will leak or publish this data for free. And we saw that many times. Some of the cases related to source code being released, for example, that happened with Cyberpunk, one of the known games in 2020. It happened with Kaspersky back in 2016. It's happened with so many different companies. So this type of ransomware, they basically steal data, and they don't encrypt it. They just They just say, if you don't pay, we will publish that data. This is still considered a ransomware. Some others rename the file extension so the files looks like they are inaccessible. For normal users, it might be very difficult to understand that it's just renamed. Examples of known ransomware. One of the most known was WannaCry, and infected over 100,000 organizations, 150 companies, because it was using Eternal Blue exploit. WannaCry is still running until now. It's still encrypting files. Ryuk, which was one of the most sophisticated type of ransomware, was mostly targeting enterprises. SamSam, which is a .NET malware and used to target healthcare organization, and there's so many more. What people don't know about ransomware is that people think there is a different way to detect a ransomware, or there is a different way to protect against ransomware. But ransomware is mostly the ransomware attacks looks exactly like normal target attacks. The target ransomware is basically a targeted attack that ends up with a ransomware. The same tactics, techniques, and procedure, but in the impact part, they also add the file encryption. Sometimes even the whole attack is being carried as a banking Trojan or as a normal target attack that steals some files, and at the end, the attacker decides to drop the ransomware to capitalize more financially. Ryoko, for example, was deployed by Emotet, which is a banking Trojan, as a secondary malware. You know that most of the attacks, most of cybersecurity attacks are made for financial reasons, and ransomware is a way to add more income. So they might steal some information, they might steal some credit cards, they might steal lots of things and gets them, let's say $100,000. If they added a ransomware at the end, they will get not only $100,000, they will get $130,000. So it gives them additional income coming from their attack if the company actually paid the ransom. So this is basically the ransomware attacks, and the best way to really block a ransomware attack is to detect target attacks early on before they reach the ransomware, because the attacker stays in the organization for as long until he gets all the information is needed and basically get bored of the organization, and then, okay, this is the time when I run the ransomware and go away. Sometimes you run the ransomware once you start to be detected. So two things: you need to detect the attacks early on, and second, you need to, when you are planning your eradication or your containment process, you need to make sure that you're not alerting the attacker in the middle of the process, because you need to know how big the scope of this attack, how many accounts he compromised, how many ways he can get access back again to the system. And once you know all of his entry points to the company network, you can make a one-time eradication process to kick the attacker completely out of the network with no way back. This is what is exactly needed to protect against ransomware attacks. There are also other tools that can help detecting the behavior of a ransomware attack, which is the file encryption specifically. One of them is the file integrity monitoring, which detects file encryption and mass file changes on the system. Honeypots. Sometimes you don't need to have a way to monitor file encryption, but to have ways to detect if there's you have honeypots everywhere that detects if there's a mass encryption or mass file access or mass file share access. Let's say a decoy file share that gives sense to the attacker that includes some sensitive information. So the attacker goes and accesses this file system or this file share, but it's actually It is just a honeypot to detect if there's anyone that is trying to access this information. And once you see a program that encrypts this file or open this file or edit this file, you can detect there's a ransomware running or there's an attacker in place. Canary tokens is the same. There are files inside the system spread everywhere that looks like legitimate applications, it looks like legitimate documents, and looks like important documents. So they might get encrypted in the way, and once they get encrypted, you get an alert that one of these files have been edited, has been changed, and you should investigate. So this is a good way to detect there are some malicious things that's happening inside the system. Also file auditing. Monitoring, let's say, with the Windows system logs, you can monitor the event ID 4563, which is to file modification, as well as some of the sysmon file events IDs. They have multiple for high volume files being accessed, modified, and deleted. PowerShell logs. For detecting suspicious PowerShell activities, especially we talked about that in the Fileless attacks, and of course monitoring for suspicious events in general, like a process attempt to launch VSS admin, which deletes the volume shadow copies. So many of the attackers, they try to delete the volume shadow copies because they don't want the attacker, the victim, to return back to a backup or to any of the shadow copy backup to return back to the system. So they use VSS admin to delete all of the shadow copies, and this itself can detect the malware behavior. At the end, and then it is like a normal attack, but the only thing is that once the encryption happens, which is the last phase, if you can detect the target attack early on, that will be a perfect way to stop any ransomware attack. But once you reach the point when the ransomware is running, you need to continue the attack as fast as possible. The first thing is to isolate the machine from the network to avoid encrypting backups and file shares. Hibernate the machine if possible to preserve the memory as well as to stop the encryption, or shut down the machine even if you lose data, but it can help terminate the encryption process. You can also use EDR to isolate the machine. Some of the EDRs, like Carbon Black, we talked about it before, can help in isolating the machine out of the network and out of all the shares, so you can take a memory dump and then terminate the machine from Carbon Black response, for example, to do the process. After that, you can either remove the malware and turn back the machine or re-image the machine and turn it back, or you can wait until the malware analysis finish, until the investigation process finish, to remove the malware or any additional malware in the system. So you do not you do not format the whole laptop, but you actually just wait until the malware analysis finish and you know all the artifacts, delete all these artifacts, and return the machine before the encryption happens and before all of that happens. This is, of course, for the investigation. You will need to also analyze the memory dump, because that will help you find some files is being used that's still being encrypted, is still in place, extract some keys. Sometimes the malware is using a local key. It's not common. Mostly they use a public key and private key, and the private key is on the server. But if you're using one key to encrypt the files and to decrypt them, or he's using or even the decryption keys are still in memory, they can be extracted from the memory. That happens with WannaCry, for example. You can extract the private key from the memory itself, because he generates the public key and the private key, and then he sends the private key to the attacker. So you can still Find the private key inside the memory. Of course, you will need to perform a complete incident response process, which is identify the root of the attack, how it happens. Maybe there's other malware in the system. Some cases, an attacker run a malware that gets all the blue team to focus on that attack and spend all of their time in that attack while he remains silent with the other malware, stealing other information, doing other stuff. So you need to investigate further. You might need also to reverse engineer the malware and find ways to decrypt the files, decrypt the bcap that's being sent to the attacker if it contains some private keys, and find all the ways to revert back the attack. For end user, if you are just a person who wants to protect his machine, you have actually a ransomware protection implemented inside Windows 10. You have this option inside Windows 10. It's called ransomware protection, and it's it's called control folder access. And basically, it restricts access to specific folders to folders you choose inside your system. So you can say that I don't want any program or any ransomware to access that folder. This folder, any program tries to access it, it has to be allowed by me, and it will be like a user access control that you have to click allow to actually get any application to modify any file there, or even creating a file there. Another option is using cloud hosting, OneDrive, Dropbox. All of these cloud services, they provide file versioning, which allows you to revert back to an older version. And if the malware encrypts all your files, you can email them to revert back all your Dropbox folder or your OneDrive folder one step back and make sure that you have all the files back again. Whatever an attack happens, this question always comes at the end. Should I pay the ransom or not? Once this encryption happens, the problem here is that antivirus can help you delete the malware. The antivirus guys and the malware analysts can help you understand the malware, but none of them will help you always decrypt the file. Some cases, or most of the cases, let's say many cases, the malware actually, wherever you analyze the malware, whatever you do, you cannot decrypt the files. The reason for that is the private key is being generated and stored in the attacker server, and you have no access to that private key. You encrypt all the files with the public key, and the private key is in the attacker CNC, and you cannot access that file. So you get always the question, should I pay the ransom or should not pay the ransom? If you have backups, you can restore them. If the malware of the attacker didn't detect all your backups, then you have a way to revert back to. But if you did access everything, there might be a discussion that will always be there, should we pay the ransom or not? At the end of the day, paying the ransom does not guarantee that you will get your files back. That doesn't guarantee you anything. There's no insurance. There's no refund. He can give you the key back to decrypt your files or not. Most of the attackers, they try to pay back, to give back to decrypt the files so they can keep their reputation. And if they encrypt other company files, they can also get paid. But you cannot rely on that. There are also some websites like nomoreransom.org and idransom.malwarehunterteam.com. They can help you if your malware is known, if the ransomware is known, and there is a way to decrypt the files from this ransomware. You can check these websites, write the ransomware name, and you will find a way to decrypt it. The last thing I want to finish off is the indicators of compromise and your rules. So indicators of compromise are mostly used to see if I have been compromised with this attack or not. If, let's say, there's 5 companies that are in healthcare, let's say 5 different hospitals, and one of them has been attacked by a targeted attack with a malware, let's say Samsung ransomware, and they have lost hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars. Then the other companies, the other hospitals, can take these indicators of compromise, things that the file names, the registry entries of this attack, of their malware, the hashes of the Samsung ransomware, the exploited vulnerabilities, and so many information, and they can search in their systems if they do have these files or not, if they do have these registry entries or not, if they do have these indicators of compromise or not. If they have one of them inside their systems, or some of them inside different systems inside their hospital, they will do a full investigation, and probably they might have been compromised with the same attacker, but this attacker didn't run the ransomware yet. So they're able to detect the attack earlier and basically protect against this. This process of sharing this information regarding the attack once an attack happened is called threat intelligence. Threat intelligence relies a lot on what's called indicators of compromise, which is some indicators that you have been compromised with the same exact attack. Some of these things, some of the indicators of compromise, as we said, the registry entries, mutex, file names, hashes, exploited vulnerabilities, or mostly they have a number called CVE number, and so on. Also, what can help is YAR rules. As we said that hashes can change, some attacks are fileless, and with all of this, YAR rules comes in handy to detect these attacks. YAR rule is basically, or YARA is a very small scanner that can scan files and as well can scan memory. It has the ability to search on a massive amount of data in a very short time. It can search for strings, can search for regex, for wildcards. So it is very, very flexible to find different information. It can search by binary, it can search by text, it can search by so many things. It has plugins to allow easy parsing and easy analysis for PE files, even for if you run files in Cuckoo Sandbox. It has a module in Cuckoo Sandbox, so it can basically check some behavior. YAR rules become widely used by VirusTotal, which is owned by Google now. And VirusTotal Intelligence allow you to, if you are subscribed to VirusTotal Intelligence, some corporates do, they can scan by the YAR rule against a massive amount of database from VirusTotal, and you can see if this malware has been seen before, for example, or any of the samples have been submitted to VirusTotal. Sometimes we find samples that are actually created by the attacker and submitted directly by the attacker to check if his malware detected against multiple antiviruses. YAR rules are basically very, very simple. They have a section called, first you start with rule, then the rule name, and between brackets you can set the metadata, and this metadata is completely optional. You can set any data. You can put the date, you can put tags, you can put author, you can put whatever you want to put here. It's up to you, and it's always like this. The name of the tag and then equal and then the value of that tag. You can set as many tags as you want. And this is the metadata. Then comes the strings, and this is the most important part. You start with any variable inside strings with the $sign, the name of the variable, and then equal, and then the signature you are looking at. This signature can be a text, can be regex, can be binary data. It can have some wildcards, so this bytes skip them, like skip some specific bytes in the middle. It can have so many things. Mostly when you craft your own signatures, you look for unique strings for that malware, unique text inside this malware, or some code inside the malware that represents that malware. Maybe an encryption algorithm, maybe some code that really represents that malware. This is mostly what we look at when we create our own signature. Sometimes we use as well some API names that helps us to improve the YAR rule and make it exactly on that malware and decrease the false positives. At the end, we use something called condition. And the conditions are basically, it tells the scanner where to look for in these strings and how many they have to match to call this file infected by or being dark rat. And what's like this condition is basically all the check part, what to check exactly on. These signatures, the Yara tool search for all these signatures and then it executes that condition to know if it's really if this file is really infected or not. We see here condition says all of them has to be existed, so all the strings has to exist. Sometimes you might say, oh, I only need 2 of them or 3 of them, and you can write 3 of them and he will only take 3 wherever the 3 are and he will call that file infected. Another example like this one with the black energy. There's no metadata. The strings are basically this time are binary data, as you can see. This binary is presented in hexadecimal, and you can put a question mark or double question marks on any of these characters to basically say I don't know what is exactly this byte, or I don't know the second part of this byte. Like let's say in here 81, I can write 80 and then question marks. So it's 81 to 80F, anything on them, or 80 to 80F, and so on. And here he's saying I just want 2 from any HC and a number from any variable starts with HC. This could be one of the rules. You can have HC, for example, in HB and HA, and say I want 2 of HC or 2 of HB or 2 of HA. So that could be a way to detect different variants of black energy, for example, and have one YAR rule that has all the signatures for all the variants and have your condition that scans for all of them. Also, YAR rule can take, as you see here, it can take as well some BE information. So here you import BE, and then here you have a rule to detect UBX packet files by checking the section names. And this in the condition here we say BE.sections either 0 or 1, and then the name contains UBX 0 or the name contains UBX1. So this way we can set a condition that looks at the BE section, that can work with the section names, it can work with the import table, it can work with so many things. Another one here we see it includes a regex. Not only it includes regex, like a variable and then equals and then a regex check. It can also add, here we see that he adds some modifiers, like let's say no case. So it doesn't matter, you just ignore the capital and the small. It could be capital, it could be small, the letters, it could be uppercase, lowercase, it doesn't matter. So here you say ignore any case. There's so many other modifiers related to if it's encrypted, if it's if it's encoded, and so on. YAR rules has so much of flexibility. And for us to create a YAR rule, as we said, we focus on the unique parts inside the malware, the unique functions, the unique algorithms, or unique strings when we create our YAR rule. I hope that you got some benefit out of this training. We have covered the red team, the blue team, the incident response, the investigations, the digital forensics investigation, and live forensics. We have covered malware analysis. We have covered also the rules, a little bit about threat intelligence as well. If you want to go more in depth into incident response, malware analysis, and the blue team, we have actually a complete training that just covers that. It's more than 40 hours of content. We have more than 1 hour just for the rules that we just described now, and we go in depth into doing it by ourselves, step by step, in a hands-on video, as well as lots of exercises. The training is more than 40 hours, with more than half of it just hands-on, step-by-step videos when I do things in front of you, analyzing malware and analyzing attacks and BCAPs and so many different things. It also includes my own coaching inside of that, with a Zoom course where you can share the screen, you can ask questions in cybersecurity, in your resume, in the training itself, with the different examples about malware analysis, about your own exercises you're doing in your own time, about anything. It's really a training that will help you get from where you are to find a great job in this field. Of course, we don't guarantee exactly the job, but we guarantee you will be from the top candidates applying in every single job. And this is my mission to help you with that. If you want to know about more about this training, check our website, maltrack.com, and check the training page, maltrack.com/join. Check it out. The training is there. See you in the next video or next trainings. Make sure that you check our emails for more videos, more free content, and see you next time. Bye bye.